Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you again this Friday. Excited about today's episode. A little different than what I've done in the last few weeks, so I'm excited to go in a little bit of different direction. First off, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody out there. I hope you're enjoying the holiday season. A few announcements as I go forward before I get into the meat of the show. The next couple weeks, I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and take a 2-week vacation from doing the show. However, I've decided that since I'm not going to be doing a live show, what I would do is dig back through my old content from my old show and go ahead and basically put together a little bit of a best of the Web of Conspiracy. And I'm going to release those as podcasts, at least certainly one of them next week, maybe both of them next week, and if not, maybe one each week. I'll be posting announcements to Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and all that to keep everybody informed. But my intention is to do a little bit of a best of, kind of get into some of the content that I did on my old show, and then see what I, put it together and kind of give you a little bit of something over those 2 weeks while I'm not around, and touch into some content that I've discussed in the past, briefly in some of these episodes here, but really haven't gone into a whole lot. So I'll kind of bring back a little bit of best of some of my personal favorites that I've had over the months that I've done this show. Find some of the ones that I think are some of my better shows, some of the content that I think is the most interesting, and then I'm going to go ahead and release those as podcasts then the next couple weeks. And then I'll be back with you then the second Friday in January. So this will be the last live show until I have out January 10th. So in the time being, though, I will put out two podcasts of best of content. So like I said, if you don't already follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus, now would be a great time, because that's how you're going to be able to find out most of this information as in terms of when I'm going to release the podcast and things like that. And I'll also try to put something up on the website as well. So any of the above would be the best ways to be able to keep in touch over what the show's going to do the next couple weeks. But there will be some content over the next couple weeks. Nothing brand new, just best of from my old show. So for those of you who just started listening to me from this new show on Spreaker, then this will be new content. So if you don't go back from beginning of this year, then there'll be some new stuff that you'll probably more than likely hear that you haven't up to this point. So stay tuned for that. And like I said, I will go ahead and make some announcements about that on the social media. So excited about that. And there's a lot of great content that got left behind on the old show. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to take that content and bring it here for this audience here who hasn't had a chance to necessarily hear it. So very excited. Okay, so moving forward, I'm still working on some potential forum possibilities. I haven't gotten a whole lot of feedback on that from anybody yet, so if you have an opinion one way or another, let me know. I'm still investigating it. I haven't determined which one I'd like to go with ideally yet. A couple in mind, but once I've pegged something down, and that might not be until after the holiday season is over, before I make a final determination in regards to whether or not I even go forward. I'm thinking about it. I found a couple providers that I think would be possibly worthwhile, but there again, I also need to gauge interest. So let me know one way or another if that's something that you'd be interested in. Okay, well, I think that covers everything in terms of show related and stuff like that. So let me switch gears and move into the main topic for today. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that what I'm going to talk about for some people may be a little uncomfortable and may offend some individuals, and if I do offend, I certainly apologize. That's not my intention. My goal in doing this show is to kind of bring about some of the darker myths that are attached to the Christmas and holiday season. In doing so, trying to bring out some of the some of the things that are actually still practiced in well, some Eastern European countries, Germany. A lot of what I'm going to talk about, it actually originates from Germany. A lot of it's Germanic lore. So a lot of these things are actually still being practiced. So I really wanted to kind of bring this out to those in the West, and those who maybe aren't as familiar with some of the other festivals that are still associated with Christmas that were brought in to Christmas, and kind of touch on a little bit of what is considered the holiday season. So that being said, the first thing that I'm going to talk about is Christmas and paganism. Okay, and for those who are well versed in history, you'll know that Christmas, there is some significant debate as to when the actual birth of Jesus Christ occurred. However, it is deemed, at least in the early church in those days, felt that it was bestly celebrated if you can combine this with the current pagan celebrations that were happening at the time, to be able to convert those pagans to Christianity. So you see that during this Christmas season, there are a number of pagan festivals, and for that matter, a lot of what we consider to be Christian traditions here in the West are really pagan traditions. The Christmas tree is certainly a pagan tradition. The Yule log, the Yuletide, all those things, that actual whole Yuletide thing is a pagan festival, during which there were sacrifices made by farmers of their livestock, and they would spread this blood from these animals all over the place, including spraying themselves, and they would then brew this meat and would be in a celebration of the harvest and hope for a bountiful coming harvest following the winter. So a lot of what we just celebrate as Christmassy is actually a little more pagan. Furthermore, during the Yuletide celebration that occurred, there was lots of drinking of ale, and it was quite a scene. It certainly wouldn't be something that many would associate with a Christian idea. In building upon that, I know there's a lot of people who get really worked up about the idea of saying Merry Christmas instead of the Happy Holidays. So the thing that I want to express out there is that I don't believe that in saying Happy Holidays is that any way affront to Christianity or any other religion for that matter. As a matter of fact, Happy Holidays really it came about as a response to Christianity in celebrating the 12 days of Christmas. The word holiday, its etymology, what it is based off of is holy day. That is literally the meaning. Happy holy days when you say happy holidays. So I know that there are a lot of people who get, who are very fundamentalist Christians who get very upset about that term and think it's some kind of affront to them. And I think it's important that that's at least addressed somewhat, that that's certainly not the intention. Originally, the intention was to celebrate all of what was considered the holy days following Christmas as well. In the early church, those were all very important days, a number of them, obviously. So I think before we get all worked up over this idea of that, I think everyone kind of needs to take a step back from that a little bit and understand the history behind it and why that is not an affront to any type of Christian belief, which I hear a lot of people get really upset about this time of year, and I think it's way overblown. The interesting thing is, as I said, there's so much of what is pagan and what is considered Christian at Christmas, and it's all so mixed in that not everybody can really always really see what's what. The funny thing about the idea of the Yuletide, this Yuletide festival, is that this is really a topic that maybe I would even be able to do on a regular show some other time, because the Yuletide itself is a rather bizarre festival. It was believed that during the Yuletide, supernatural creatures, supernatural beings, would haunt the countryside and go on this, what they called a wild hunt. It was derived from the wild hunt. You would have now for those of you who are video game players and who play the game Skyrim, you'll recognize this particular creature that I'm going to mention. these what they would call, and I've heard these pronounced two different ways, draugrs, that were, for lack of a better way of describing them, zombies. They would rise from the graves and they would participate in this massive wild hunt during this festival season at Christmas time. This pagan festival that wound up being incorporated into the celebration of Christmas by the early Christian church. So it's interesting that you see that for the pagans, this is a much more supernatural type of a celebration. They saw all these wild beasts and beings and all these things that were out hunting and killing during this time. So it was a far different type of celebration. But the actual Yuletide festival, the Wild Hunt, it is referred to in German, and there's a number of other names as well, depending on, even depending on where you're from in Germany, Austria, even throughout some of Eastern Europe, number of different names for this. And also in Sweden and Norway and the Nordic countries. This is also very much a Nordic tradition as well. So really kind of a fascinating thing. To read some of these stories, it takes on more of a turn of a Halloween type of festival than it does a Christmas festival. But nevertheless, in the efforts to convert pagans, these were all incorporated, as well as one that I won't really talk about much today, but the Roman Saturnalia, which occurred at the same time, the festival to Saturn. That was as well incorporated into the idea of Christmas and celebrating Christmas, and it was selected this time to help kind of convert all these pagans to Christianity, which was very effective. Because these pagans didn't want to lose all of these festivals. They didn't want to lose all of these celebrations that they had by converting. And that was initially a huge fear for many. Now, while once converted, they celebrated the birth of Christ instead. Now, there were still those who practiced practices that were considered pagan still, and did ritual sacrifices and things of that nature. However, as time has gone by, that tradition has changed. And interestingly enough, I would tend to look at this new Christmas that we have in our modern times, this very commercialized Christmas, is really just an extension of all these other pagan festivals. It's the new paganism. It's a neo-paganism in terms of this commercialization. And I know those who consider themselves practicing pagans might be offended by what I just said, and clearly that wasn't my intention, but it is really an extension of this festival during this time that is not necessarily related to the idea of the birth of Jesus Christ. And I find it interesting that people who consider themselves Christian completely devote themselves to the material nature of this holiday, which is in fact not what the intention was ever really supposed to be, but is certainly more grounded into the idea of the pagan rituals. There are two particular entities, and specifically that I'm going to talk about, that kind of touch on a little bit of this. And you'll see once again where these Christmas traditions are coming from, these pagan festivals and these pagan ideas. One of which is, perhaps this is the most popular, was Krampus. Many refer to him as the Anti-Claus, the opposite of Santa Claus. Now, in Germany, December 6th is celebrated as St. Nicholas Day. Of course, St. Nick often being referred to as Santa Claus. And he would be the one who would reward good children with presents and things of that nature. Well, Krampus would come to these homes the night of December 5th, and it's often referred to still as Krampusnacht in Germany, where that night before, children would leave their shoe or their boot outside their front door, and when they'd wake up in the morning, they would either find a reward in the shoe, or they would find a rod in the shoe. Now, the rod would indicate that they were a bad child. I know some people would, rod, why rod? Well, I think it goes back to the idea of sparing the rod, spoiling the child, beating the child with a rod. So the misbehaving children would have a rod delivered into their shoe. It was also often speculated that Krampus would also abduct misbehaving children and take them back to his lair, at that which point they would never be seen or heard from again. So it's certainly a more darker twist and turn upon what many would consider Christmas. Now, for those of you who aren't really familiar with the idea of what Krampus looks like, he very much, if you look at the old depictions and even some modern depictions of what it looks like, embodies this idea of what many in the Christian church denote as Satan, as a man-goat type of hybrid creature, very nasty looking, and would seek to punish these misbehaving children. For those of you who have listened to some other shows I've done in the past, as well as on the previous show in the old network, I often talked about these creatures that are associated with taking children who misbehave or taking children that get lost. A lot of this, it's very much a reflection of what was happening in these rural areas during the times. That needed to make sure that we could keep the children under control by giving them something to fear in the unknown, as well as making sure that they behaved, making sure that they didn't wander off, making sure that they were well-behaved children. All these entities that are created and centered around this idea of having children, being able to keep them in line, keep them from misbehaving, keeping them from wandering away, getting lost. So it's very fascinating, and this falls into that category yet again, the idea of having this creature that would either punish, or in some of the worst case scenarios would even abduct and possibly kill and eat the children. Now, this next one was one I was less familiar with, but it is also part of Germanic paganism. And it's the idea of what is referred to as the Perchta. Now, this Perchta was it sort of over time morphed from being a minor deity into a malevolent entity in German paganism. Was often depicted as, and there's two very distinct depictions of what this Perchta is, and it would be either depicted as a beautiful woman in white, or a very ugly, sort of hideous type of woman, often depicted as having animal type traits. Jacob Grimm of the Grimm brothers often spoke of the Perchta. Very kind of a creepy looking thing, but what I think is most interesting is looking back into some of the lore, the legends of the women in white. Almost everywhere that you go, no matter what country you are, there's talks of this haunting of seeing these women in white along the side of the road or in the wilderness. The woman in white idea goes back centuries beyond what maybe a lot of people who recently claim seeing ghosts of a woman in white out in the middle of nowhere. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. I could do an entire show, I think, on the idea of the woman in white, because there are many reports worldwide about that. So here you have this depiction of this entity as being this woman in white. Once again, with the Perchta is often also associated with the Yuletide celebrations. During the Wild Hunt, she would be seen. She would be one of these specters, as well as during the 12 days of Christmas. And she's also depicted as being like a spinning and weaving, some sort of weaving cloth. Then that goes back to the days when she was deemed to be sort of this minor deity instead of this malevolent entity that I shouldn't say more recent, because 400 years ago isn't really recent, but the idea of what the Perchta has morphed over time, and is, at least in the more recent lore, relatively speaking, is considered this evil entity. Now, she's also associated with a similar sort of thing as Krampus, in that she would reward good children with candy in their stockings, or if they were bad children, she would give them coal instead. This idea that is associated with Santa Claus in Western tradition was often associated with this Perchta. So you have to wonder, you sit back and think, wow, all these traditions that we celebrate really are very much seated in pagan ideas, in pagan festivals, in pagan celebrations. And the things that we focus on in the West, in our heavily commercialized society that we've become, are very much these pagan rituals. And I personally am not a fan of all the materialism. That being said, I certainly, am not opposed to buying gifts for people. But I think for me, I still carry a lot of the idea of just enjoying being with family and spending the friends. I mean, grateful for the year that was and looking forward to what is coming. And that's always how I've always looked at the idea of this Christmas and holiday season. And there are those, though, that focus solely on what they get for Christmas, what they get for all their, from their family, and rather than what they give. So it's interesting to see how strongly some of these pagan rituals are still holding, and I think have morphed over the years. Because, let's face it, more often than not, some of these pagan celebrations, they're certainly much more fun. Much more fun than some of the more traditional Christian type of celebrations. And let me be clear, I'm not trying to call out or depict or try to say one thing is better than the other. But what I am saying is so much about what we understand and associate as Christmas now is so rooted in the Germanic paganism of hundreds of years ago that came with us when we traveled and settled into North America and things of that nature here in the West. And those traditions, spread throughout Europe as well. So you often still see, and as I said, Krampusnacht, and there's greeting cards, the Krampustrakten, that are also given out. So much of these traditions are still being practiced. Now, the last particular thing about the Percha that I thought was the most interesting in terms of creepy is that she is supposed to be, during these 12 days of Christmas, to be honored as with a traditional feast, meaning that you're supposed to eat a traditional feast in celebration of her. And that feast was, at least at this time, was consisted of fish and gruel. And if you ate anything other than that, or did not eat that traditional feast in celebration of and honor of Percha, she would, in the night, come and slice those people open and then proceed to stuff their insides with straw. Certainly a far more morbid depiction of a Christmas celebration, but that was often how this malevolent entity was depicted during the holiday season, was that she would, if you did not eat the practiced dinner, well, then she would come and slice you open and stuff you with straw. I don't know about that. That would not be my first choice of ways to die. That's for sure. No, not fun. Needless to say, I don't know. The real question is this all just lore, these pagan ideas, or were they built upon something? As I said before, I think that there's something to be said about the idea of the women in white. That is a phenomenon that is still ongoing. So the question begs, is there something more to this? Are these pagan rituals, the reasons that they were being celebrated, was it merely superstition? Was it merely the idea of these mythical creatures? Or was there something more to these things, that the reasons why that these pagans, before the spread of Christianity, developed these rituals as a way to either protect themselves or to ensure a good growing season the next year? It's interesting, and some of these, as I said, are certainly a little more fascinating than others. I think the idea of the Krampus is very attached, at least it would seem, to the idea of Satan, a very similar type of entity. So when you're looking at what the church did in those days in terms of converting pagans, it made it very easy to assimilate something like Krampus into the belief system, when Krampus looked very much like the way that Satan was depicted. And some of that, and certainly in the last few hundred years, is a direct result of that conversion process. But some of it goes back even further. So you have all of these pagan rituals celebrated. And some are a little out there, absolutely. But I can't help but wonder, what if there is some sort of beast out there? You talk to a lot of very fundamentalist Christians who believe that Satan is very much as Satan is depicted in that respect. The idea of the hoofs, and there are even some individuals who claim that they've been, they've had a demon in their home or something of those natures, and they hear these hoofs, what they describe as hoofs, or even some that have said that they found hoof, they've thrown down flour or something on their floor in their kitchen and find hoof prints in the next morning, as if something upright that it was hooved walked through. So some of these depictions are, they still stand. And in case you're curious, if you haven't looked at the Krampus, or for that matter, the Perkta, very creepy looking. The Perkta has, there were also people who would, and I hadn't really gotten into this much, but there are men who would go out dressed as these Perkta, would wear Perkta masks in an effort to ward off other evil entities, just because of how hideous looking the Perkta could be. In terms of when the Perkta is depicted as being very ugly and hideous, it is like a deformed Krampus in many respects. It's even uglier than the Krampus is depicted. So very strange looking entities, very bizarre looking, but it begs the question of, is this all just superstition that Christianity was able to meld into the reliefs to be able to create the Christmas season, convert the pagans, and then as the pagans abandon all these things, some of the ideas maybe got lost or are still there but aren't being practiced in the mainstream now. The question that remains is, I wonder how many of these things were based on real possibilities, or if they were just superstition. I don't know. It's fascinating, and this might be something, as I said, there's a few topics here that I may go into much further in coming shows. I like the idea of the women in white, and if you haven't checked that out, I mean, Google search it, Bing, whatever search engine you want to use, something that isn't spied upon by the NSA. Check those things out because there's a number of stories of ladies in white. It is a long-standing urban legend, and there might be something to this. And when you read some of these references as to how the Perkta is depicted, it is very similar. So if there's information out there, feel free to check that out. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much what I've got for you today. Now, as I said before, I'm going to be releasing at least 2 episodes of podcast over the next 2 weeks. I may just release both of them on the same day. I haven't made that determination. I will, however, keep everybody updated on Facebook and Twitter and Google+, and as well as try to post some stuff on the website. Love to get some feedback on whether or not a forum is something I should really pursue. As I said, I've got a couple possibilities, and I may go with it and see how it goes, and if it doesn't get a whole lot of traction, may decide the heck with it. But love to get some feedback and see what everybody thinks about that. Once again, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, regardless of what you practice. I hope that you do so in a safe manner, and that you get a chance to enjoy the season, enjoy the time with your family. Certainly, you never know. This could be your last holiday season with somebody, so you want to make sure that you cherish every moment that you possibly can. So I just want to thank everybody for listening. This has been a great transition over here to Spreaker. I'm excited about the future, and I have to tell you, I've already surpassed the number of listeners that I had for the last month already into December. The show's growing, and I couldn't have done that without everybody's help and support here. Hey, if you love the show and you know someone who loves it, share, let somebody else know. I'm having a blast doing it, and I hope to be able to continue to do this even more. And I will look forward to talking to everybody next year. So once again, have a great holiday season, and I'll see you in 2014.